Recorded Books and One Click Digital present Founding Feuds, The Rivalries, Clashes, and Conflicts That Forged a Nation by Paul Aron, narrated by Richard Ferrone. Preface. 13 clocks were made to strike together, John Adams wrote in 1818, recalling how the 13 colonies united to seize their independence. Adams knew this had been a tentative and tenuous unity. On July 1st, the day before the colonists would vote for independence, John Dickinson of Pennsylvania had argued for delay, mustering the same arguments moderates had been making in the Continental Congress for months, that it might still be possible to reconcile with England, that Americans were not yet united behind independence, that America needed allies and troops before it could take on the world's most powerful empire. To take on England prematurely, Dickinson said, would be to brave the storm in a skiff made of paper. The day of the vote, Delaware supported independence only because of the last-minute arrival of Caesar Rodney, who had ridden through the night to break a tie among that colony's delegates. Pennsylvania supported independence only because Dickinson and fellow moderate James Wilson chose not to participate, and New York abstained, meaning one of Adams's 13 clocks struck not at all. Still, Adams was right to recall that in July 1776 a great many Americans rallied round the cause. Dickinson, despite refusing to sign the Declaration of Independence, served as commander of a Philadelphia battalion and chaired the city's committee responsible for raising troops and building fortifications. That even 12 clocks struck together was, as Adams wrote, a perfection of mechanism which no artist has ever before effected. Or perhaps ever again effected, for the unity did not last and has only rarely returned. The progress of evolution from President Washington to President Grant, wrote Henry Adams, famed historian and John's great-grandson, was alone evidence enough to upset Darwin. Most Americans would agree that the history of the nation's leadership has hardly been an example of evolutionary progress. Mired in gridlock and repulsed by partisan bickering, we long for an era when our politicians were statesmen and philosophers. These longings can blind us to the reality that our founders were as apt to disagree with each other as any 21st century Democrats and Republicans, and their disagreements were at least as heated. Their feuds were driven by ideological differences, to be sure, but also by personal ambitions. And they were by no means above attacking their opponents, spreading stories of scandals, both true and untrue, playing on voters' emotions and manipulating the electoral system. At stake, they believed, was the nature, indeed the survival, of the American Republic. Take, for example, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Hamilton thought Jefferson would import the terror of the French Revolution to America. Jefferson thought Hamilton would turn America into a monarchy. When Hamilton was Secretary of the Treasury and Jefferson Secretary of State, George Washington attempted to mediate with little success. During the Revolution, Hamilton had served in the Continental Army. Jefferson spent much of the war at home. When British forces approached Monticello, Jefferson galloped away, or, as Hamilton put it, the governor of the ancient dominion dwindled into the poor, timid philosopher, and instead of rallying his brave countrymen, he fled for safety from a few light horsemen. For his part, Jefferson called Hamilton a man whose history, from the moment at which history can stoop to notice him, is a tissue of machinations against the liberty of the country which has not only received and given him bread, but heaped its honors on his head. When Hamilton caught yellow fever, Jefferson accused him of hypochondria. The stakes were just as high when Jefferson feuded with John Adams. Jefferson referred to his victory over Adams in